What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another weekly update. So there's a ton of news stories to go over here this week thanks to the LA Auto Show. Lots of big reveals, and so I apologize it's a little darker here. It took me a lot longer to go and compile all the news stories here for this week. But the first, probably the most exciting vehicle to debut at the LA Auto Show was the brand new Porsche 718 Cayman GT4 RS. And so it's the, more aggressive version of the already very aggressive Cayman GT4. So it gets the 4-liter naturally aspirated flat-six engine from the 911 GT3. It still revs to 9,000 RPM here, but it does do 10 less horsepower than that car, with is still very impressive 493 horsepower and 331 pound-feet of torque. And Autoblog asked Porsche why it's 10 horsepower less, and they explained it's because of the additional back pressure of the longer exhaust required for this mid-engine setup versus the rear engine setup on the 911. So totally makes sense. It's not like they're trying to play any games here. It's just that that's the limitations they're working with. The director of Porsche's GT model line said, "We didn't hold back on this one. We want to party with this car. We want to celebrate the naturally aspirated engine, horsepower, and RPM because someday in the future it'll turn to electric." So, I mean, it sounds like this could be, one of the last gas-powered Caymans, especially now that we've seen the Mission R, which is the all-electric, most likely replacement for the Cayman eventually. And so this could potentially be the final thing before things go electric for the Cayman. We know the 911 still has a long future with the gas engine, but for the Cayman here, this could be the end of the gas-powered Cayman. We'll see. But anyway, that extra power hugely improves the performance as well here, dropping a half a second off the regular GT4's 0 to 60 time. So now it takes just 3.2 seconds. It'll also do 196 miles per hour, so plenty of top end too. One other cool thing about this engine in the Cayman is that in order for it to get enough air, they actually added extra intake scoops where the rear quarter windows used to be, which also gives this car, they say, the most intense acoustic experience in a GT car. And so, I mean, man, hearing those things going crazy right behind your ears there, it'd be very, very cool, I'm sure. It only comes with a 7-speed PDK dual clutch automatic, and Porsche explained to Autoblog that there's no manual option because they don't have a manual that fits in the GT4 platform that can handle the power, since the 911 transmission that they use with that engine is a different design, with the rear engine setup and stuff. I'm not sure why they couldn't have upgraded the manual from the GT4, which can't be that much different, to handle the extra power, but regardless, that's their main reasoning here. They also added, though, that all the RS cars are always PDK anyway, and that we believe the car is made for the racetrack and that its purpose is to set the best track times. PDK is the way to go. Regardless, it's still just awesome this car exists even with the PDK. The PDK's gearing is also shorter as well, so that should help, with even more aggressive performance there. And it also handles better, of course. It has a new suspension setup with all kinds of adjustability and GT3-inspired ball joint connections. Handling is also improved by the more aggressive aero pieces, including a new front splitter, a big rear wing for 25% more downforce overall. Plus, they also managed to drop 49 pounds from the regular GT4 thanks to a carbon fiber hood and fenders, along with thinner rear glass. The curb weight is now 3,227 pounds here for the RS. And thankfully, though, they didn't strip the interior really, so that's why, it isn't as huge of a weight loss as you might have been expecting. It still gets all the same stuff as other Cayman GT4s, aside from they've swapped in fabric door pulls instead of the normal door handles. But, it still has air conditioning, still has a radio, all those types of things, thankfully. It also, thankfully, doesn't sound like it's going to have cap production, at least not as far as a numbered, production goes, because they, are saying there's just no mention of that. So I'm sure it's going to be nearly impossible to get these things still, though, because, unless you're one of Porsche's loyal customers and you're at the top of the list for allocations and all that kind of stuff, if you're not already lined up, you're probably not going to get one, regardless of whether they cap it or not, because there's still only going to be, they're not going to produce this thing forever. So we'll see. But anyway, for those few lucky people that are able to get their hands on these, they'll be starting at $143,050, which is about $40,000 more than a regular Cayman GT4. But the price doesn't even matter because these things will not depreciate. This will only go up in value and is, an instant collectible. And so these types of vehicles, even if you aren't rich, it doesn't matter what the price is, because if you can find some way to pay it, it's a good investment usually. So crazy to see that. And Porsche also has revealed the track-only Club Sport version of the GT4 RS, which is only, track legal. It's not road legal. So this is a fully race prep car, no airbags or anything, just a fully stripped interior, all that. It also gets the 911 GT3 Cup engine, which does do 7 more horsepower for a nice round 500 horsepower in that model there. But I think, part of that is because you have less restrictions and stuff than you have to worry about on the road car. So cool to see that version as well. But that's not the only new Porsche that was revealed at the LA Auto Show. They also revealed a new Taycan Sport Turismo and GTS trims. And so, as far as the Sport Turismo body style, we'll start with that. It's the same wagon version as the Cross Turismo, just without the extra cladding and the extra ground clearance, and doesn't have the rugged looks or anything. But I think that is super cool to just have a normal wagon. I love that Porsche's offering this here, and hopefully this wagon style will be available with other trims too, and not just the GTS. But as of right now, it's just the GTS Sport Turismo, and that's all that they at least revealed. So hopefully there'll be, Sport Turismo versions of other ones, but we'll see about that. But anyway, as far as that GTS trim goes, it's going to be available on other Taycans, so it's not just in the wagon either. You can get a sedan with the GTS as well. And so it's going to be getting sportier suspension tuning for the air suspension, along with unique calibrations for everything, unique tuning. Also, if you go for the rear axle steering, that's, unique tuning as well. It gets 390mm rotors, which is 30mm bigger than what you got on a 4S Taycan, but still smaller than a turbo. And power-wise, it nicely fills the huge gap in power between the 462 horsepower of the 4S and the 670 horsepower of the turbo. So basically coming in right in the middle of that 200 horsepower gap, it does 590 horsepower here for the GTS version, and they did that by basically giving it the bigger rear motor from the turbo, but retaining the smaller front motor from the 4S, I believe. So it should give it a little more of a rear bias setup too, which would be very interesting. 0 to 60 is 3.5 seconds, and that is 0.3 seconds faster than a 4S, but still a half a second slower than the turbo. But I mean, these are all sub 4 second, vehicles here. So I mean, we're not talking about anything that's remotely slow. It's still very, very impressive. It uses the 93.4 kilowatt hour performance battery plus from the turbos, which can charge from 5% to 80% in 22.5 minutes, and no range rating was given, but considering it's using the biggest battery pack, but it has less power, it should definitely do more range than a turbo, and could actually, be one of the top versions as far as range goes. So that's kind of interesting. We'll have to wait and see what the range rating ends up being. But visually, it gets the usual GTS enhancements with black accents, darker headlights, sport design body kit, all that kind of stuff. Inside, you get the race text material on everything. Anyway, so deliveries will be starting on these in the second quarter of 2022, with prices starting at $132,750 for the sedan. And it's basically just about $2,000 more for the Sport Turismo at $134,650. So very cool to see those. And moving on from Porsche here, Dodge had a reveal at the LA Auto Show. So they revealed the Challenger and Charger Hellcat Redeye Jailbreak trims. And so we're going to end up needing a whole billboard to fill up to actually be able to have enough room for this name pretty soon, because it's like they keep adding words. The actual technical name is also SRT Hellcat Redeye Chargers and Jailbreak. It's just like, oh man, it's going to take you 5 minutes to say the name. Anyway, it's an awesome vehicle even with the long name. And so for the Jailbreak versions here, it adds 10 more horsepower for a total of 807 in those models, which is one less than the Demon, which I feel like is as high as they're going to go without disrespecting Demon buyers. But who knows, they could also just kind of still go beyond that. But I feel like we're nearing the end of the horsepower gains for the Charger and the Challenger here. Anyway, 807, super awesome. And so beyond that though, Jailbreak orders also have no limitations on the option combinations. So that's really the biggest news that Dodge is focusing on. The 10 horsepower is nice, but when you're talking about this much horsepower, it's not a big deal. So, but the biggest thing is you can pair any color with any interior, with wheels, whatever, and it's not limited to the current options either. So Dodge's CEO said, for those looking for a unique appearance, we are going to let customers run free through the styling archives, and we're taking most of the parts and pieces we've used over the years, adding a few new ones, and letting customers build their own one of one. Kind of similar to the program they had with the Viper before that got killed off. But his quote continues here. So if you're dreaming about owning a Stinger yellow Challenger with brass monkey wheels, hammerhead gray seats, blue Brambos and red badges. I'm not sure we should, but we'll build it for you. Which is an awesome quote. Tim Kuniskis, the CEO of Dodge, is an awesome, very cool guy. And so that's hilarious. But so that's kind of what he's saying, is they'll literally do anything you ask, which is kind of funny. Now, as far as, pricing and all that kind of stuff, the Jailbreak package adds $995, so it's $1,000 more, which isn't bad even for just the 10 horsepower. They didn't break out what it's going to cost for all the individual options, but, once you're getting up to any kind of, Hellcat Redeyes, you're talking about very expensive vehicles. So, another 10 grand, give or take, to have a one of one thing. I'm sure those buyers probably won't mind too much, even if you do load it up with a bunch of expensive options here. And so that's pretty cool to be able to make your own one of one, essentially. And it's pretty subtle too, because aside from a little Jailbreak badge there on the passenger air vent, other than that, there's no indications that you have a Jailbreak version. So it'll be a little bit of a sleeper in that regard. So unless you really have a combo that's wild and stands out, chances are, unless you're not going to know it's, anything special unless you actually looked inside and saw that badge. So very interesting. And supposedly if you order now, the cars could be arriving as soon as next month. They said by the end of 2021 here. So very interesting to see that. Mazda this week has revealed their new SUV, the 2023 CX-50, and all the rumors and reports on this vehicle were completely wrong. So unfortunately, this is not the debut of the straight six or the new rear-wheel drive based platform. There was talks that was going to come with this. That's only coming now for the CX-70 and the CX-90 here in the States. The CX-60 and CX-80, which is what Europe and Japan will be getting, is going to be a little more narrow and have other slight differences. Those will be the first ones with that new platform. This instead appears to be a replacement for the CX-5 and use the same kind of mechanicals, but Mazda swears up and down that this is a vehicle they're going to be selling alongside the CX-5. This is not replacing the CX-5. They said the same thing with the CX-30, and then sure enough, the CX-3 went away. But with this, there's a little more justification. I'm actually inclined to believe them a little bit more this time, because they say that the CX-50 is actually too wide to be built in the Japanese factory and is likely too wide for Japanese and European streets. So whether or not the CX-5 sticks around for our market remains to be seen, but at least as far as worldwide goes, the CX-5 will have to live on because it'll be better suited for Japanese and European roads. So we could be seeing a divergence of Mazda USA getting a lot of unique models, and that's why we're getting the CX-70 here and the CX-90. I still think that, maybe if the CX-5 doesn't go away here or, elsewhere, I think it could still go away here. Potentially, but at least you'll have another year or two to buy a CX-5 if you don't like the CX-50 here. There's some other interesting changes here for the CX-50 as well. So it's going to be built at the new Mazda and Toyota factory in Alabama, and so that's a pretty big change as well. And the width, they're saying, speaking of how wide it is, they say it's even wider than a CX-9. It's also, according to Autoblog, their chief engineer revealed that it's also longer and bigger inside, and the overall height is a tiny bit lower, but it has more ground clearance than a CX-5. But they didn't give any kind of exact dimensions just yet, so we'll have to wait and see about all that. But it's also on the same platform as the Mazda 3 and the CX-30, so it's actually on that smaller, kind of platform, but that also means that all the mechanical bits carry over from those two models, basically. So you're going to get the same 2.5 liter 4-cylinder motor and the turbo version of that. You're going to get the 6-speed automatic transmission still, same all-wheel drive system, and also the same torsion beam rear suspension. So getting rid of the multi-link rear, going to the torsion beam like the other Mazdas there, which they claim is for a more consistent handling feel. I think those models, the CX-30 and also the Mazda 3, still handle very, very well, but just interesting that they've gone to that. As you can see, it is more rugged looking, and it has some new modes to go along with that ruggedness. There's now a towing mode and an off-road mode. Supposedly it will tow more than the CX-5, but they didn't say, again, any exact numbers. And the all-wheel drive system has been upgraded a little bit here. It's going to be standard as well in the CX-50. There's no way to get a front-wheel drive one or anything. So it's been beefed up with a heavy-duty coupling and a larger clutch pack for the all-wheel drive system there. And so should be a little bit better off-road, and that off-road mode should certainly help navigate. Because they say, I guess supposedly there's a good amount of people that actually do take their CX-5s off the beaten path, go camping in them, that kind of stuff. And so this will be a little bit better for all that kind of stuff. You can see also this one has these attachments for roof rack things and stuff like that you can add on as well. There's also going to be a hybrid version that's going to be coming eventually that will be using Toyota components, but that sounds like that's still a couple years away. So we'll see what they do mechanically with that, if it's just the Toyota electric parts or also the Toyota motor and everything else, but we'll see. That sounds like it's a little ways off. But inside it gets familiar Mazda design, elements there with a few unique touches, like the available panoramic roof you can see for the first time. And you also have some like vertical air vents there, and a slightly newer version of the digital gauges and things like that. And so anyway, these are going to be arriving next spring, but we don't have any pricing for those yet. Subaru this week has revealed the US version of the Solterra EV, which I talked about last week when it was revealed in Japan. Now here in the States, we have a few more details for our market. It's only going to be available with all-wheel drive here, just to stay consistent with Subaru's messaging here in the States. And unlike, its Toyota sibling, that's going to be available with front-wheel drive as a base model, and then there will be all-wheel drive as an option on the Toyota. Subaru's all-wheel drive only, so that is one difference between the two, aside from the other, small styling changes that I, again, discussed last week. And so, yeah, it does 215 horsepower. Other places worldwide are saying 214. It's 1 horsepower. I'm guessing it's just the way it's rated or something. But Subaru's saying here 215 horsepower, 248 pound-feet of torque. It'll do a 7.7 seconds 0 to 60. So definitely one of the slower electric vehicles out there. But like I talked about again last week, I think Toyota and Subaru are kind of doing the logical approach of giving it the same performance basically as would you get with any other compact SUV. A lot of them do around that 7-second time for a 0 to 60, and not everything needs to be as fast as a Tesla. So I think this totally could make a lot of sense, especially if it keeps the price nice and low. And so it runs a 71.4 kilowatt hour battery. The Subaru is estimating here with the all-wheel drive will do about 220 miles of range. Not very impressive from a range standpoint, honestly. Subaru also said they're focused on making it pretty rugged and capable, and so it's going to have 8.3 inches of ground clearance, which is pretty good for just SUVs in general, and especially for EVs. That's definitely one of the best ones out there, but still a little bit down on what you get on like an Outback or something. But it also has an X-Mode all-wheel drive system, which they say is even a little bit more advanced in this because they're able to individually play around with each wheel, and it also is going to have hill ascent and hill descent control. And as far as the inside goes, again, we've seen it many times now here in the past year or so with all the various prototypes, and then just last week. And so anyway, get the funky gauge cluster there towards the base of the windshield, along with Toyota's 12.3-inch screen that appears to be running Toyota's newest infotainment software. So that'll be a big switch from even the newest Subaru stuff for people that are used to that. This is going to be a lot different, but that new Toyota system looks really good, and so great to see that in here. And like other EVs, you can also use an app to remotely control various functions like preheating it, pre-cooling, all that kind of stuff. And so the big question, though, that we still don't have answered is pricing. So Subaru has not revealed pricing, and they said it's be showing up sometime in the middle of 2022, and so pricing will come closer to that on sale date. And then moving on to the Toyota version, that also made its US debut here at the LA Auto Show, the BZ4X. And so most of the same stuff as the Subaru, so I'm not going to repeat myself a bunch, but like I mentioned last week, Toyota is available with front-wheel drive on, is an option, and you can go up to the all-wheel drive if you want. Front-wheel drive one does 201 horsepower, and the reason why the all-wheel drive version only does 14 more horsepower, by the way, that was one question I had last week, is like, why is it, you get an extra motor in the back and you only get 14 more horsepower? And they said the reason is it doesn't use the same front motor as the front-wheel drive version here. So the all-wheel drive Toyota, and obviously in just the Solterra Subaru, they use weaker 112 horsepower motors both in the front and then in the back. And so that it's 50-50 as far as power goes still. So there's no bias or anything, at least as far as the setup is concerned. So that's kind of why front-wheel drive version just gets a completely different motor, which, like I said, it sounds like Lexus will be the one to actually put that more powerful 200 horsepower motor on both axles, and we'll get a 400 horsepower Lexus EV down the road. But in the meantime, Toyota only gets one of those, and that's it. And maybe we'll get a GR version of this BZ4X someday with a 400 horsepower setup. That'd be cool. But In the meantime, yeah, so that's the reason why. So that now makes sense. But even though it's only 14 more horsepower, that extra traction of the all-wheel drive system really helps that 0 to 60 time. 7.7 seconds for the Subaru, and most likely, the Toyota here. If you go for the front-wheel drive version, it adds an extra 0.7 seconds onto the 0 to 60 time, so it makes it, a mid 8-second car, so much slower there with the front-wheel drive version. Anyway, the battery is also the same, in the Subaru as the Toyota, of course, but since, you can have front-wheel drive with the Toyota, they're claiming a higher 250 miles of range there for that front-wheel drive version, so that'll be the way to go if you want good range and you're okay with front-wheel drive. And Toyota says you can get an 80% charge on a 150 kilowatt charger in about 30 minutes, so, pretty standard there. There's no pricing yet for this one either, and it'll also be arriving again in the middle of 2022, so stay tuned for more details on those, but at least, now we have all the basic stuff here on those, and we'll see how they sell. Hyundai at the LA Auto Show here has revealed the 7 Concept, which is a preview of the upcoming 3-row electric SUV that they're working on, which will likely just be called the Ioniq 7 when it comes to production. And so you can see it's a little far-fetched here on the outside with the design, but look for some of this to inspire the production vehicle, which is supposedly going to be arriving around 2024. The interior is also very futuristic and won't be anything like the production vehicle either, with this lounge setup. It has a mini fridge, even a shoe care compartment that supposedly makes your shoes less smelly. But 2 interesting features that might make it to production potentially, depending on what the world looks like in 2024, is that there's this new hygiene airflow system and a UVC sterilization system. So the airflow system is kind of similar to what you see on airplanes, where it can isolate airflow between the front and the rear passengers and can reduce cross-contamination between people inside of the car. And once the occupants get out, the UVC system uses ultraviolet light to sanitize all the surfaces on the inside of the vehicle and kill any bacteria and viruses, which could be very handy. Would have been really handy here in the past, year and a half, 2 years. But this is something a lot of other companies are also working on, so that's why I'm inclined to believe that something like this might actually be something that they'll put into production here eventually. But we'll see about all that. And so, anyway, if there's no other thing here, just, the takeaway here is that it's going to be a 3-row EV that is coming that will not be a Tesla Model X, which means it should sell like crazy because no one else has done a 3-row EV yet other than Tesla. So I'm sure for those who can afford whatever this thing's going to cost, it'll sell very, very well in 2024 once it finally arrives. But cool to see that. Kia also did their version of this because they'll be getting a version as well on the same platform. And so their own concept is called the EV9. And so, you can see there's a lot of styling differences. It's completely different compared to the Hyundai. So I think Toyota and Subaru should maybe, figure out how Hyundai and Kia have managed to do this and, have some more differentiation in their designs in the future. But regardless, the Kia looks much more rugged and boxy here for the EV9. It's about 3 inches shorter than a Telluride actually, but has a wheelbase that's about 8 inches longer, which should mean that you're going to have a lot more interior space most likely. The vehicle is also about 3 inches wider than a Telluride, which should also help with that interior space. The interior is also a little bit more realistic here in the Kia. The only thing that could really come to production still is the 27-inch screen setup potentially. I could see something like that totally, by 2024 being, not too far out for a Kia. And so we'll see about that. But like the Hyundai, like I said, it's going to use the eGMP platform from the Ioniq 5 and the EV6 that are already, starting to ramp up production here. And so anyway, this Kia should be arriving sometime again around 2024 most likely. So very cool to see that. And if you want one, you should probably get in line right now at your Kia dealer, because if it's anything like Tellurides, it's going to be tough to get your hands on if it's, as hot as I think it's going to be when it finally does come. But for a production Kia that was revealed at the LA Auto Show, they showed off the hybrid version of the 2023 Sportage. And so it's just the same thing we were basically expecting it to be. It's going to be using the same powertrain as the Tucson Hybrid and the Sorento Hybrid, which means you get the 1.6-liter Turbo 4 along with a 6-speed automatic and a 44 kilowatt electric motor. It does the same 226 horsepower, and thankfully, unlike the Sorento, the Sportage here can be had with all-wheel drive, just like how you can in the Tucson. And so Kia is aiming to have about 39 mpg or up to 39 mpg here out of this Sportage Hybrid. And the hybrid will also be available on the LX, the EX, and the SX Prestige trims, but not on the X line or the X Pro models. So at least they're going to have it on the top trim, because that's something, again, they weirdly made the Sorento worse by having it be front-wheel drive only and having the nicest version being the EX, which was strange. So at least here, I can understand it not being on the more rugged, stuff, because if you're knobby tires and stuff, you don't care about fuel economy anymore. So it makes sense to skip it on the off-roady kind of stuff, but to have it on the other trims makes a lot of sense. And so yeah, there's no pricing yet for those, but I mean, they should be coming out here fairly soon. And so anyway, interesting to see that. Fisker this week has revealed a production version of their electric SUV called the Ocean. And I haven't covered it too closely because all these electric startup companies and stuff, I kind of approach them all with a lot of caution and kind of, it's one of those believe it when I see it kind of things. This seems to actually now be ready to be produced, so that's why I'm covering it. So it's going to be built by Magnus Steyr in Austria. So they actually do have production in place here, with the first models being built before the end of 2022, they're saying. And in addition to the finalized styling and interior that we're seeing, which, by the way, also has this rotating infotainment screen to put it into landscape mode called Hollywood mode. And so, unfortunately, they didn't have any pictures of that, sadly. So I just have one little picture from the configurator. It's so strange. Fisker put out like a 50-page press release on this thing, but they didn't give us any normal pictures unless you were actually at the LA Auto Show and could take pictures on your own. But I just use stock photos here for copyright reasons, and there is none from Fisker, so I'm just showing you a video of the configurator, and that's it. So anyway, we have all the main specs, the trims, and the prices for it here. So the base model will be a front-wheel drive, 275 horsepower version that does a 6.9 seconds 0 to 60 and will do 250 miles of range. That one's going to be starting at $37,499 before incentives. So basically, with the $7,500 tax credit, it's a $30,000 car. The next step up is the Ultra version that gets a dual motor all-wheel drive setup for 540 horsepower, 340 miles of range, and a 3.9 seconds 0 to 60. So that's going to be the more interesting one there. Then there's that one's going to be also $50,000 starting. So not bad for the performance and the range and stuff. That one seems to be the best value there. And lastly, there's going to be an extreme version that only adds 10 more horsepower and 10 more miles of range. But it does drop the 0 to 60 time by 0.3 seconds. But anyway, that one balloons the price up to $69,000. So I don't know if that's just like fully loaded as well. And that's part of why maybe the $50,000 price tag has like no options on that lower one. I don't know. But anyway, so that's the pricing and the structuring for all those. I'm glad that they're coming in, nice and, pretty affordable. Especially that front wheel drive version could potentially be a little bit of competition for, Toyota and Subaru again with those, 200 horsepower EVs, SUVs and stuff. But really the unknown thing though is, when you're trying to go up against the Toyotas and the Subarus and even like the Mustang Mach-E and things like that, Nissan Ariya, anything that's from an established car company, it's like Fisker has we don't know their reliability track record. I mean, all they ever did, basically was the Fisker Karma thing, which was very funky and, hardly anyone bought any of those. So, I mean, it's just going to be, there's no service centers. They say they're going to have partners they're partnering up with for service, but I mean, it's not going to be great. I mean, even Tesla, still doesn't have a ton of service centers and things like that. So, I mean, I think that's going to be the biggest problem for Fisker, even if it is priced really well and it is a really cool vehicle. Are people actually going to even know about it and be able to even get one and have it, be serviced and stuff. So we'll see. Again, I'm still very skeptical about any of these new startup companies, but very interesting to see that nonetheless. And moving on from the LA Auto Show, BMW here has teased the Concept XM. And clearly the purpose of this teaser was to just assault our eyes with the biggest grille BMW has ever done, and is proudly even highlighting it by having those enormous nostrils be illuminated as well. And yes, and also the XM name seems kind of strange. I just think of Sirius XM. I'm guessing since it's a different sector, they're allowed to get away with using that name. But anyway, it looks cool otherwise, with the deep sculpting there on the hood and the rest of the body and stuff, the cool headlights. But I mean, come on, like what has happened at the BMW styling department? Like, yes, you want to stand out. Sure, everyone wants to stand out. But I mean, do you want to stand out for the right reasons or the wrong reasons? Like, just because people are talking about your design does not mean your design is a success. I just don't know about those enormous... I mean, I have no clue. It's like we're living in a cartoon world with BMW or something. Like, I don't know... I don't understand it. I mean, yes, I know styling is subjective. I'm sure there's going to be a few people that like it. I know there's some people that like the new, M3 and M4 grills, but good grief, those grills look tame in comparison to this thing. So I don't know. Whew, I think BMW is trying to take the cake as the company with the most hideous car designs currently available. So anyway, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. But I mean, the first time I saw that, I'm just like, what? Like, am I on drugs or something? I'm guessing the designers might be, though, because I mean, like, good grief. Anyway, I'm not going to be on a soapbox about this forever. Other things, getting back to the script here, the BMW has lined out a few other details here about it. So they're saying that it's going to be a full M vehicle that is electrified. So the past rumors here, have been suggesting it'd be a twin-turbo V8 with a hybrid setup. So we're not talking about anything fully electric, I don't think, just yet. And it's also not going to be getting a non-M version. It'll only be M because they say this will be a unique X for the M brand, displaying the new front-end design of the BMW luxury class. So this is the beginning. This is the beginning for the new luxury class look of BMW. Who knows which BMWs are considered a luxury class, because I feel like that's all BMWs. But, I mean, this grille just simply will not fit on a 2 Series. It would take up, the entire front end. There wouldn't be room for headlights if they had this grille on a 2 Series. So, I don't know how much this is going to extend to other models, but it sounds like the grills are going to continue to get larger and larger. It's just going to get worse at BMW if you don't like these nostrils. So find a new brand or buckle up. Those are going to be your two options. So anyway, very interesting to see that teaser. I think we're going to be seeing the full reveal here in early December. Yeah, we'll see what the rest of it looks like. But whew, that front end. For some better news here, Ford has announced, it sounds like they're listening to customers, that next year you'll be able to get a Bronco with a Sasquatch package and a manual transmission. Previously, you couldn't combine those two things. Now you can. Unfortunately, the manual is still only paired up with the 2.3 liter motor, not the 2.7. So if they really keep listening to customers, that's what they should be doing next. But in the meantime, at least you can now get that combo, which is great. Ford has also announced 2 new special editions here for the Mustang after already announcing the 2 new editions last month, the Stealth Edition for the Mustang and the revised California Special package. So now the other 2 new editions are the GT500 Heritage Edition and the Coastal Edition. So the GT500 Heritage Edition gives you this exclusive Brittany blue color with stripes in Wimbledon white to pay homage to the 1967 GT500s. And regular 2022 GT500s, you can also now get them in code orange for the color, which is the same color you get on the Raptors. And then the Coastal Edition is for the EcoBoost Premium Mustangs, both coupe and convertible get it. And it seems to recycle some of the parts from the California Special, like the side scoops and the grille, and apply them to the EcoBoost instead. So basically, it's kind of like a California Special Light for those who want that stuff on an EcoBoost. I think this is Ford's, they always are very good about using up all their spare parts and, piling them together and recycling stuff. And so I think that's kind of what we're seeing here as, again, the generation's winding down, clear out the stock of side scoops and stuff and, get all that done. Fill every last little niche for any holdouts that might have been like, wow, I really want this tiny little obscure thing, and so now they're making those little packages available. So that's cool. Ordering is going to be open now, and they'll be starting to arrive next spring. And lastly, we have a few interesting rumor stories here to discuss. So first, the Supercar blog is reporting that a new V12 Vantage from Aston Martin is coming, and we saw it was spied apparently back in the summer doing laps in camo at the Nürburgring. And so that model of V12 Vantage here with this new Vantage will be arriving sometime around the 2023 model year alongside a refresh for the regular Vantage. And unfortunately, though, it sounds like the V12 is going to be very limited. They say supposedly it's rumored they're only going to be doing 299 of these, which is, it sounds like strangely like even more limited than we would expect it to be. They also say it's going to be doing a little less power than the Speedster, which is the only other Vantage-based vehicle that has the V12 currently. And so in that, at the 690 horsepower, they're saying 670 here for this. I still think there's also room. They could also do a Vantage V12S like they did in the previous generation. Maybe that'll bump it up to the 690, or potentially, someday take us to 715 horsepower like we get in a DBS, something like that. We'll see about that. But in the meantime, time, it seems fairly likely given the spy shots and, everything else that in addition to that, there's also the Aston Martin CEO who just flat out said they're going to do 10 derivatives of existing models by 2023. Surely between, the DBX, the DB11, and the Vantage here, there's going to be, some derivatives of the Vantage. And so this could certainly be one of them. Makes a lot of sense. So very cool to see that, and can't wait for it to be officially debuted. Mopar Insiders here this week has a new report out about the next generation Dodge Durango, which is kind of an interesting report. It makes a lot of sense in some ways, but does take the Durango in a new direction. So they claim it's going to be switching back to a body-on-frame platform for the 2024 model year using the Jeep Wagoneer's underpinnings, but would be less luxury and, of course, have the Dodge styling. Again, this kind of makes a lot of sense because, it would then give them a direct competitor to the Tahoe and the Expedition. Considering a Wagoneer starts about $9,000 more than those, and even the higher trims of Tahoe and Expedition, they're like $5,000 or so cheaper than the Wagoneer, usually comparably equipped. And so I think the only thing is this would make the Durango more expensive. It's going to make it enormous, and you'd probably have V8s as standard, like the Wagoneer, although maybe they do the hybridized V6 as another, or inline six as something maybe for the Durango here, but. So anyway, it'd get more expensive for the Durango. It also would cause them to leave the very popular mid-sized SUV segment. This would bump it up to a full-size vehicle. I don't know if they'd want to give that up since the mid-size segment is so popular. So, maybe they'll fill that new gap with like a Dodge version of the new Grand Cherokee, something like that, but then you got to come up with a new nameplate for that. So we'll have to see about all that kind of stuff. And according to the report, this new Durango would be built at the same factory that builds the Wagoneer. So that does kind of line up with it going to that Wagoneer basis if, this is true about the plants as well. And they say it would actually replace the previous generation Ram 1500 Classic that's still currently in production at that plant alongside the Wagoneers. So, by 2024, they phase out that previous gen Ram that I can't believe they're still selling, but people still like that old one over the new one for some reason. And so, once that goes away, that makes room for this, and, kind of makes a lot of sense in that regard. It's just, again, you leave an enormous gap for those who want something a little bit more affordable from a Dodge SUV. So we'll see what they do, but interesting to hear that report nonetheless. And lastly, there was a bunch of back and forth this week about McLaren potentially being bought out by Audi or partnering with Audi, and then there's talks of like BMW coming into play, and McLaren shot all the reports down and said everything was wrong. BMW's also shot stuff down, but so we have a new update here, and so the new report here comes from Autocar. So they're claiming that they have a new source, not the sources that were saying all this other stuff last week. They have a new source that claims McLaren's in talks with Audi, and that those talks have progressed to an important point, and along with that, Audi told Reuters that they were open to cooperation opportunities, which sounds like Audi's kind of, suggesting there might be something there. This same source also told Reuters, or also claimed that BMW and potentially other companies could also be in early talks with McLaren. So I think McLaren, is still in financial trouble, and so they're just like, hey, like, who can partner up? Like, they're kind of trying to, get some kind of help here. And supposedly, all these talks so far have centered around McLaren's Formula One team. Audi's been wanting to get into Formula One. There was just talks that would just go in with Porsche. It seems a lot more natural to stay in-house instead of going and partnering up with an external firm. And I think that's also partially why maybe BMW is interested. But then there was also talks of this extending into their road cars as well. And so we'll see if anything develops here. It's just kind of a wait and see kind of thing, because it's now. There's talks that, again, BMW could also be interested. And, who knows what's going to happen if anything does happen. But I always thought that BMW would have been the perfect buyer for McLaren. I've thought this several times in the past as well, because, you have Audi with Volkswagen Group and all that. They own Lamborghini and Bugatti. They have their supercar companies. And now with, Mercedes partnering with Aston Martin and increasing their stake in Aston Martin, they don't own Aston Martin. They're not, a conglomerate together. But you have that, Mercedes kind of has that connection with Aston Martin, And with BMW, you know, they have Rolls-Royce, which they bought. They have Mini that they bought. They have these other brands, and especially with Rolls-Royce being high-end, you know, having a supercar brand in that umbrella would make a lot of sense. And, you know, BMW was never extended in. I mean, Audi even has their own stuff covered with the R8 and things like that. You know, BMW has no supercar. And, you know, I always just thought that McLaren kind of with their ethos, their styling and stuff, could kind of fall into BMW a little bit as far as just, you know, being a good partner company. And supposedly BMW and McLaren do also work together on battery technology currently. I'm not sure if that's where they're getting the batteries for like the Artura and stuff like that or not. But so if they're already working together a little bit, I feel like there'd be more promise with a BMW deal personally, just from the outside, you know, surface level kind of, you know, stupid stuff that I think. But, you know, it sounds like Audi might be, you know, the front runner currently. But again, it sounds like there's lots of talks, lots of bidders. We'll see what can happen. Clearly, there's appeal in McLaren, and you know people want what McLaren has, and McLaren wants money, and so I feel like a deal with someone is inevitable here, you know, at some point. So we'll see how that develops. But very interesting to hear all that. But anyway, that's it for all the news this week, guys, in this very long weekly update. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this longer one. Let me know all your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. Please continue to stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.